Alright, so let's jump into our final season, the last season of the entire show. It's really hard to believe it's only been a few months since I finished doing the actual episode reviews, and I'm now about to finish this up. But you already know how this works, ranking every episode from worst to best of the individual season, and we know where this is going to lead to next time. But for right now, let's count down the top 24 My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 9 episodes. Number 24, 246, great. I think I've made it abundantly clear by this point that this episode is now officially the worst episode of the entire show. So yeah, I don't need to say what I've already said. 246 Great is a terrible fucking episode. The fact that it basically assassinates Rainbow Dash's character, where she becomes a total bitch the entire episode, and it felt like the main reason why this episode is the bottom of the barrel, and this episode eclipses both Princess Spike and Marks for Efforts, is that the fact that this episode personally attacks me for how it handles the concept of teaching kids about cheerleading being an actual sport. Basically, it's the shit way to do it. Honestly, I don't really need to say what I've already said about the episode. Honestly, go watch the actual episode so you can understand my hatred for this episode. But yeah, 246 Great is a terrible fucking episode. Hands down the worst episode of Season 9, but quite frankly, in my personal opinion, the worst episode of the entire show. As I said in the review, how this episode somehow eclipsed both Princess Spike and Marks for Efforts still astonishes me 4 months later. Whatever. Next, number 23, Daring Doubt. The last Daring Do episode that essentially spit in the face of anybody that actually cared about the Daring Do episode with a stupid, contrived plot convenience where both Cavaleron and Alizolo were not really bad guys but just misunderstood ponies. Get the fuck out of there with that stupid bullshit. As I said in the actual review, not every bad guy needs to be reformed. And this episode really made me hate this episode even more so than the other Daring Do episodes. Honestly, in terms of Daring Do episodes, I will say that I feel like Daring Done was worse because it gave me a lot more to be angry about. So while this episode basically gave me actually softened the blow somewhat, it's still not a very good episode, and it was honestly a terrible way to finish off the Daring Do episode, and it really made me not want to care about anything Daring Do after. That's how bad it is. Number 22, Sweet and Smoky. Basically, the episode that tried to get me to care about Garble's reformment, and I still don't care. Honestly, the fact that the show gave Garble multiple episodes for me to try to care about for him, except for the fact that the episodes that he appeared in basically continued to prove that he was basically still a generic bully. So his softer side basically came out of left field, and quite honestly, why should I care? Why should I care about Garble's reformment when he's never put in any effort to try otherwise? On top of that, the bully-only characters were still just as annoying as ever, but what's keeping this episode out higher than the bottom two was the fact that Smolder was the best part of the episode, but aside from that, the episode is still shit. Number 21, A Trivial Problem. Honestly, I can kind of relate to this episode, which is why it's a little bit higher than the bottom three, because I can understand Twilight getting in her competitiveness. However, the fact that she acts like one of the biggest hypocrites when trying to get rid of Sunburst, who was also guilty of doing the exact same thing, it really just kind of bothered me so much how Twilight got that competitive. And I understand that, that's how people are, and admittedly, I'm like that too. But this was an episode that I really just could not get into, and it really doesn't really get me to connect with anything. So, I really don't know what to say about the episode. It's better than the last three. It's not abysmal, but I don't really think it was that interesting of an episode. And quite honestly, that was the last episode I watched until I ended up reviewing the last 10 episodes. Number 20, Going to Seed. Honestly, I get what this episode was trying to do, but at the same time, it really was just not that interesting of an episode. I get Applejack and Apple Bloom actually bonding and trying to get Applejack basically re-energize her childhood dreams to capture the Apple spirit thing. But honestly, the episode doesn't really do anything with it. I do like the gradual growth that Applejack goes through when bonding with her sister, but it's not really anything to write home about, which is why I think this episode really deserves to be at the bottom 5. Number 19, Dragon Drop. The episode that brought back Gabby Griffin, and it was nice to see her and Spike interact, seeing another friendship. And then this episode tries to bring back the Rarity Spike shippers, and basically, instead of trying to show Spike finally got past his relationship with Rarity as sort of a love thing since season 1, Rarity decides to become the jealous ex-girlfriend that practically stalked him and ended up ruining his relationship with Gabby. Yeah, they do eventually come around to it by the end of the episode, but, honestly, I really thought that we finally got past it, and it's just whatever. Honestly, what's keeping this episode probably a little bit out of being the worst of the worst is that Gabby and Spike's relationship did help out a little bit, but I really just didn't like this episode that much. Number 18, She Talks to Angel. Yeah, I'm sorry. I really don't care what other reviewers have said about this episode. I really do not like this episode. The episode basically highlights why Angel has been an asshole since season 1, and while this is one of the better examples of a body swap episode that's somewhat good, but the fact that Angel basically proven that what we already knew, he essentially was an asshole, I really just could not get into it, and the fact that this was coming out of Fluttershy's body, and while I do have to give Fluttershy credit that she does also see Angel's perspective, that does not really excuse his bratty behavior, and the fact that this came at the tail end of the final season, I just felt like it was too little too late for me to care about Angel, and quite honestly, I just felt like he was going to start the exact same shit up again if he was going to come back. Honestly, while I do think this episode kind of succeeded in the moment, I didn't really think the long-term effects were going to last. So, I really just did not like this episode. Number 17, The Point of No Return. Honestly, there's not really a whole lot to say with this episode. I guess really what I just did not like about this episode, I'll give it this. I think what I will give this episode is that it was at least slightly more entertaining. Honestly, I don't really know what I could say about this episode. I think essentially, I'll give it this. It's not bad. Honestly, I just kind of forgot about the episode, which is why it just took me a while to think about it. And what's unfortunate is that I do like what this episode is going through. The over-top humor of Twilight trying to return an overdue library book, and the fact that, she's willing to go out of her way to try to basically remake a promise with an old friend. But I think that's probably what's keeping this episode in the lower half of the list, and why it took me so long to even talk about it, is because The Point of No Return is, as I think as good as it is in the moment, it's probably one of the more forgettable episodes of the season. And it really sucks because there are some good things about it when you think about it, but you just completely forget about it by the time it's over, and it's completely overshadowed by a lot of other episodes. So while it is good for the moment, it's not really all that memorable. Number 16, Flame Shields Up, Common Ground. Now look, obviously I've made it clear that since his introduction in Stranger Than Fanfiction, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of Quibblepants. I do like his second appearance a lot better because we do see him basically try to be a better, stepfather to not only a pony that he really likes. And on top of that, I do understand and love the heart that they put in this episode to give Quibblepants, his voice actor, honestly something to do and do something in the memory of his late wife. And while I do appreciate the effort that he goes in, the main reason why this episode doesn't even crack the top 15 is because of Wind Sprint. And look, I understand what they're trying to go with, and I understand why, children have a struggle with, understanding of, a child having a step-parent instead of their biological parent. I'm going to call it as I see it. Wind Sprint was being a brat. And I understand that, she's just trying to, she doesn't accept the changes that Quibble Pants is trying to do, and that he's not his dad. I really do not care. I'm going to call it like it is. If she's being a brat, she's being a brat. And that's what she was throughout the entire episode, and she was never appreciated of all the effort that Quibble Pants tried to go through until the last 5 minutes. And that's really just the main reason why, in spite of how good this episode is, I'm not putting this any higher within the top 15 because of Winspit really being a brat. But aside from that, it is a good episode when you really think about it. Number 15, A Horseshoein. I really do like the idea of this episode. Now, yes, while it is another Trixie-focused episode, I will give Trixie this, that she does have some good ideas, but the way she went about it, when, of course, trying to get the job of Vice Mayor to work with Starlight was a bit jarring at points. However, the stuff where she stands up to Grandpa Gruff or Gallus was definitely absolutely satisfying. And honestly, the blow-up that Starlight had on Trixie really showed that Starlight wasn't willing to bottle up all her emotions. And speaking of that episode, the frustration and venting that Starlight gave to Trixie, it stuck a lot more than it did and all bottled up. So I will give this episode that. But I guess really there's just a lot of things that really, I'm not an educational pony, so I really don't know the ins and outs of a lot of things. And I understand what this episode's trying to go for is that as much as you want to work with your friends, you have to be realistic with trying to basically come up with ideas for who would be best qualified to fit for the job. And while we do see that Trixie does eventually come around on that, it was honestly kind of hard to tell by the beginning of the episode. And what's barely keeping this episode in the top 15 is that the humor was not really all that funny, considering that Trixie did the wink gag like 7 times when it's really only a rule of 3, and Trixie ended up breaking that rule by like the first 5 minutes. Honestly, there's hints of good in the episode, but it's not really one that I really like. Number 14, Growing Up is Hard to Do. Honestly, for the last Cutie Mark Crusaders episode, this one, while this episode was good, as we actually got to see the Cutie Mark Crusaders basically try to act in grown-up bodies, that kind of leads to a problem where they're still acting like kids even though they're in adult bodies. And while it does teach the lesson that even if you are big, that doesn't mean that you know everything. That it takes experience to learn everything, and that sometimes making mistakes is part of growing up. I think really what's keeping this episode back from being higher is that it kind of felt like the Cutie Mark Crusaders kind of regressed, especially when considering that the last Crusade came out prior to this episode, and that honestly felt like a booking end to the Cutie Mark Crusaders' episodes. And quite honestly, I feel like that if the order was reversed, if basically Growing Up is Hard to Do came out in the first half of Season 9, and the last Crusade was in the last half of Season 9, then I feel like I would have liked this episode more. And I think also, like I said in the review, this episode was basically made since about Season 5 or Season 6, and quite honestly, it felt like it. And I think those are kind of the main reasons what's holding this episode back. It's still a good episode, but I think if it would have been a solid episode if it was like a Season 5 or a Season 6 episode, not a Season 9 episode. Number 13, Between Dark and Dawn. Honestly, an episode that actually focuses on the two sisters, where Celestia and Luna become too involved, and they basically start planning on their retirement, and we do see glimpses of Twilight and her friends basically start to becoming the next rulers of Equestria. Honestly, I really wish that, we could have gotten more out of that story, and honestly, what really makes me not like the episode as much was the fact they once again made a Fancy Pants, who for the longest time was the most likable Canterlot citizen, into kind of an asshole, which I really was not a fan of that. And the fact that it took Twilight almost the entire episode to realize how to delegate and not understand what it means to ask for help, even though that's a lesson that she's learned multiple times now, it really kind of bothers me. However, what I do like about the episode is that when it does focuses on the two sisters, seeing how opposite ends they are when they basically try to relax, And seeing them still try to harbor some of the stuff from the past, and to see them still love each other, is actually something that's really great. And honestly, in that episode, I really like it that much. Number 12, She's All Yak. This is a really great Yona-focused episode. The fact that Yona really tries everything she can to try to be an impressive dance partner to Sandbar and trying to fit into Ponyville society. And what I also like is that it's not Sandbar who's pressuring her. He was basically kind of a laid-back guy, and Yona didn't know what to think. And honestly, it was just an all-around fun episode, and it really kind of makes me flip-flop back and forth between who the best of the young stick is between Gallus and Yona. I really do like this episode, and I really like how the main six try to be supportive of Yona as best as they're able to, but it really goes to show that Yona is still just being herself, and she's able to be herself, and that's what draws everybody to her, and I think I like that episode in that aspect. Number 11, The Last Laugh. I really don't get why people don't like this episode. I really like how basically we got to see the return of Cheese Sandwich, and by extension the return of Weird Al Yankovic, of him trying to start a factory and basically ending up losing his laugh. And I understand the whole thing with, the gray atmosphere. I think that was kind of the point. But I think if you're basically getting too depressed over the color gray, I feel like you need to lighten the mood a bit, because that was kind of the point. And the fact that Pinky basically was the one that basically got Cheese Sandwich to get her laugh back, I felt like it was very organic, and it honestly showed that Pinky and Cheese Sandwich had some chemistry together. And it was just great to see the Weird Al song again. Honestly, I really don't get what the hate is for this episode. I actually really like the episode, and I really just don't see why people don't like it. Number 10, Student Conceal. No. Honestly, I really do like this episode a lot, because even though this is an episode that focuses on Starlight, I think what people need to understand is that it teaches the importance of wanting to set at your boundaries, because the fact that Starlight is taking on so much responsibility at work, she's taking away time from all of her friends. What I like about the episode is that we get a dozen of side characters that are the main focus when trying to hunt down Silverstream. I really do like the world building that we get behind with the cockatrices and how they're basically tamed. And just to see the action is all the more exciting. And even though it was the return of Mudbriar, he ended up getting turned to stone, so he ended up being more tolerable. And I'll admit, much like Maud, his humor wasn't as irritating as his first appearance. And like I said, I think the fact that he was turned into stone by the latter half of the episode made the episode more enjoyable. But like I said, this episode basically sets a precedent that you have to find a balance between both your work life and your social life. You have to set those boundaries so that way you can spend time with your friends, but never forgetting the important aspects of work. And I really like this episode in that regard. Number 9, The Last Crusade. Like I said, Ed, in Growing Up is Hard to Do, this should have been the final Cutie Mark Crusaders episode, because it was a perfect bookend to it. The fact that we finally got to see Scootaloo's parents after 9 seasons, and also finding out that she has lesbian aunts, was also a big surprise. But we see Scootaloo struggling with accepting of moving. And I really just don't get why Scootaloo's parents are considered some of the worst parents in media. I've listed off a bunch of examples, and considering that anime tends to have a history of incredibly shitty parents, I think that Scootaloo's parents are tame by comparison. And the thing is, they're not around her as often. They read letters back and forth, so it's not like they're ignoring their child. But the fact that the whole town of Ponyville got together and showed Scootaloo's parents why the Cutie Mark Crusaders basically matter to one another, and why they have helped so many ponies' lives over the course of the history, where they ultimately decided that Scootaloo could stay in Ponyville. Honestly, this felt like a very perfect bookend for the Cutie Mark Crusaders, and I think this was a great episode for them to go out on. Number 8, Uprooted. The episode that basically takes place after of the season premiere with the Young Six essentially trying to help rebuild the Tree of Harmony, which we'll get into shortly. And while the Young Six are at odds with trying to find the best method, the fact that they were all able to get brought together by the Tree of Harmony to essentially rebuild it together really shows how powerful their friendship was. And the fact that it was able to turn into a much larger tree, which I'm pretty sure was just used to try to sell toys, it was still awe-inspiring, as the fact that the Tree of Harmony reacted to the thoughts of the Young Six shows that Sandbar, Yona, Gallus, Silverstream, Ocellus, and Smolder were the next generation of friendship, since the Tree of Harmony was reacting to them, and that it's constantly changing and evolving. And I think that's what I like about the episode. And it was definitely kind of a perfect way to be like a three-parter. So that's what I like. Number 7, speaking of the season premiere, the beginning of the end. Really just a more fitting title, with seeing the introduction of a new villain in Grogar, basically bringing back 4 former villains, King Sombron, who we had not seen since Season 3, Tyrek, Cozy Glow, and Chrysalis to work together, only for King Sombron to strike out on his own. And of course, even though King Sombron's voice was a bit jarring to listen to at times, and it just reminded me of basically Demolisher from Transformers Armada and Energon, the thing that I will give Sombron this is that he actually did a very good job as his role as a villain, and he actually succeeded what the other villains never did, and that was destroying the elements of harmony. But the season premiere also marked a new change, where basically Celestia and Luna are ready to retire, and Twilight and her friends are essentially the next leaders of Equestria. But the action was high stakes, and it was very exciting, and admittedly gives a lot of nightmare fuel when you think about it, especially for younger kids. But it was definitely a perfect beginning, and it was honestly a great way to kick off Season 9. Number 6, Frenemies. The first villain-focused episode, where after King Sombron is disintegrated again, Cozy Glow, Tyrek, and Chrysalis have to force to work together, and when they try to get Grogar's bewitching bell on their own, they realize that they have a common enemy in hatred over the main six, and essentially they put their differences aside and essentially work together to basically succeed and even find a way to betray Grogar. It was just an all-around fun episode to see a lot of humor coming out of these trifecta of villains, the fact that they just bicker and argue with each other, and even when they actually, and it honestly gives the mindset of how each villain thinks, where Chrysalis basically tries to rush in and immediately get her revenge. Cozy Glow basically tries to manipulate ponies, but now that everybody knows her true colors, it doesn't work as much, while Tyrek, proving that he's the best villain, takes his time, observes the situation, and waits to plan ahead to figure out the best course of action. And as I said, the three of them ended up working together, and they succeeded. And it basically showed a lot more to come with this season, and it really made me all the more looking forward to see what these villains could do. Speaking of that, number 5, the Summer Sun Setback. Basically, it is a two-sided episode where while the main six, along with Discord, are in preparation of this last Summer Sun celebration, as Twilight is ready to accept her roles as the new responsibilities of being the new ruler of Equestria and essentially create a new holiday by the end, it also focuses on the villains basically trying to sneak into the archives of Canterlot to basically, get the book to understand Grogar's witching bell. And on top of that, they were able to basically manipulate all the ponies to essentially turn on each other. And once again, with the three of them now being able to work together properly, they succeeded. And as Chrysalis said by the end of the episode, while essentially the main six were able to get everything back under control and celebrate the last Summer Sun celebration, the villain's goal wasn't to try to destroy the ponies, but distract them, and kind of basically show the hints and cracks of what they could do to essentially cause all the races of ponies to essentially turn on each other. And it is definitely a frightening thought of what this would eventually come to be. And it was a great episode that I honestly kind of wish I should have sat all the way through when I first watched the episode. But it is a solid episode all around. Number 4, Sparkle 7. The show's 200th episode, and it was an absolute blast. except for Zephyr Breeze, who still sucks a dick. But aside from him, the episode was just a ball to go around. The fact that basically Twilight and Shining Armor basically had a bet on the Sibling Supreme, the whole episode basically kind of comes off as a massive heist episode, and even more so, what makes it all the more enjoyable was the fact that all the actresses for the main six basically got involved in the writing staff, and they all had a lot of creative ideas. And by the end, the plot twist with Spike and Luna working together just absolutely cracked me up. But it also goes to show how well they tried to prepare for any future event after the threat of Sombron. So it was a fun 200th episode that helped advance the story. That it seemed like the defenses seemed impenetrable until the Summer Sun setback happened. But again, this was still an enjoyable episode, and honestly, I find it a lot more enjoyable than Slice of Life. It's really fitting how the show's 200th episode eclipses the show's 100th episode. Number 3, The Last Problem. The show's final episode in the series finale. I really loved this episode so much because it was basically a perfect bookend and a great send-off to the show. Basically showing kind of what happens after the penultimate episode, where we got to see how Equestria has changed with Twilight under her rule, but also using that as a framing device to see the actual story of the pressures of Twilight being away from her friends, but they were able to keep their memories alive, and just to see, well, they do still keep their friendship in touch today. And it also gives us a lot of Easter eggs of basically showing what all the characters have done during Twilight's rule. And yes, I know I made the mistake that I called Smolder Ocellus in the Magic Rose, which, by the way, the Magic Rose is without a doubt the best song in the entire show, and it was a perfect bookend. And it really makes me all the more sad every time I think about that final scene, not just the scene of Spike and the main six in front of the sunset, but looking back of all the characters that they've helped change and impacted on their lives. And as I said, it is literally the only time that the show will acknowledge Equestria Girls and by extension Sunset Shimmer, and it kind of makes you wonder why the Equestria Girls fans ended up getting screwed over in the end. But aside from that, it was a great, great episode to end off a great show. Number 2, the Big Mac question. The last Big Mac Sugar Bell episode that focuses on the relationship, but also has the same aim basically, but it also has the same point of view as the Saddle Review, where multiple characters are basically involved in the wedding, and to see how well they own up to all their mistakes, and we do see how Sugar Bell and Big Mac are able to handle the situation. And of course, their proposal was absolutely adorable, and it really goes to show how well the Big Mac shippers with Sugar Bell ultimately ended up winning the war. As we got to see how well their friends and family just got them to be together, and it showed how well Sugar Bell and Big Mac care for each other. And it really kind of makes me wish and makes me hope that if Big Mac is able to find love, then I might be able to as well. And of course, there's really no contest at this point. The number 1 best episode of Season 9 is the ending of the end. Before I talk about the episode, I need to make one joke that I should have made during the review when our 3 villains encountered the main 6.
If it isn't the breath, the asshole, and the backstabbing geezer.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I do need to address the one thing with this episode, with the reveal of Grogar being Discord for the entire time. Honestly, it was really just more small potatoes, honestly. I think because I was already spoiled by the ending, it didn't really affect me all that much. But it was a kick-ass finale. Honestly, I still waffle back and forth whether or not I think In Twilight's Kingdom is still my favorite finale or this episode. But what makes this episode amazing is the adrenaline rush. The fact that the 3 villains were able to master Grogar's bewitching bell, take all the magic, and essentially curb stomp all the powerful figures, and on top of that, getting all the pony races to be divided, to ultimately coming out with the final battle between them as the main 6 were able to get back together. And it was very serious of how far this finale was willing to go, and to see the Avengers Endgame style reveal of all the ponies and races coming together to fend off the three villains, seeing the three gaps of generations with the final taste the rainbow motherfucker moment to essentially encase the three villains into stone, it is just an absolute kick-ass finale. And I should also mention that the action is very, very exciting. Like, honestly, like I said, not since Twilight's Kingdom have I gotten this much of adrenaline rush out of a penultimate episode. This was a kick-ass two-parter. And honestly, the build-up and the payoff was all the more gratifying, and it is just an exciting finale to watch. Well, not really a finale because it's the penultimate episode, but the thought still counts. It is an amazing episode and an amazing finale, and that is why the ending of the end is the best episode of Season 9. So, alright. So with that, we now covered all the seasons of how I ranked every episode, but we're not done just yet. There's only two lists I want to do first before I finally end my reviews of Friendship is Magic. And unfortunately, the first stop to do is that normally many people like to do a top 10 or a top 15, or in the Cartoon Hero case, a top 17 list, but I need more. So, even though I do think that Friendship is Magic is an amazing show, that does not mean it's not without its bad episodes. And the reason I bring this up is that with two lists left, you know where this is going to go. So my second to last list for Friendship is Magic, next time I'm going to be counting down the top 20 worst My Little Pony Friendship is Magic episodes in my opinion. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.